on traditional and digital recording methods. So I'm just going to go through the key points of what I'd put through, but obviously we can expand on any of them or add our own. And honestly, I don't have an agenda as such for this. I was hoping that it would be quite a free-flowing discussion between all of us. To avoid people talking over each other, it would be useful if you are able to either raise your hand or wave to garner the wooden spoon for talking. So if you are able to, can someone give us a heads up on how you do stick your hand up? Because I've lost it as well.
There's reactions at the bottom of the screen, and it's under that.
Oh, I don't have reactions.
Oh.
I've got things that aren't reactions, hopefully. Which I just, oh no, okay, yeah, I've got a more button, ... ellipsis, and at the very bottom of that is reactions, which, right. So if anyone needs to raise their hand, and reactions is not on the bottom of your screen, that's where it is. It lives under ... reactions. Great, okay, so traditional and digital recording methods. Are we losing anything through digital recording? What are we gaining through digital recording? And is there a sweet spot between digital and traditional methods? Go. Well, while people figure out how to stick their hands up, I will just say that we came up with this one in our committee around the committee the other day. And some of the examples we were talking about were a lot of the larger units now and are moving towards digital recording systems. In various iterations, but a lot of them are called the digital recording system in various companies, as I understand it. This essentially, for those of you that are not familiar, is instead of filling out paperwork of contact sheets, etc. on site, you can get on a tablet or a phone in the field and plug that data directly into what will essentially form the database. All of the survey data is surveyed directly into the same system and viewable through a map platform associated with the system. Ours is called Mapboard at Cotswold. You know, they're very straightforwardly named, but that's very sensible. We like that. But I think that at Cotswold and Oxford, because we both use the same recording system now, I feel like there's possibly a complete lack of hand illustrated plans being generated for a lot of features, and whether this is inherently an issue or and is there anything that we should be pushing from our end to challenge whether that's right or wrong. And I'm happy to take a steer on this. I have opinions, but I will share them if asked. Tom, go for it.
Right. Well, I can't find a raise hand button in any of the reactions or more options, so I thought I'd stick my physical hand up. I have a lot of bitter recent experience with this. As you know, at Historic England, we still hand draw everything, even though we survey the outlines of features to go into our database. The outlines are never a good illustration. They just show you where in the planet your feature was. We have run into units who have embraced wholeheartedly structure from motion. The idea that you do some photogrammetry, you snap lots of pictures, take some survey data, and then sadly don't process it in time to bring it back out to the trench so the person who dug the feature can actually work out where all the edges are, which is crucial when it comes to site planning. And it's all about cutting corners, unfortunately, because it's quick to take the photos. It takes more time for someone to actually look at them. So that happens in post-ex with someone who doesn't know the archaeology, trying to work out what's the important bit in this wrinkly cornflake model that got floating on the screen. And it makes my blood boil when people say they aren't going to hand draw stuff. Not least because the art of hand drawing is staring at your feature that you've just dug for 10, 15 minutes or whatever, and working out how confident am I about the edge where it meets that other feature? And is there something else going on that I've missed in here? I've looked at sections and spotted recuts that people have missed in their first recording simply by staring at it for a bit. And if we remove that, we're effectively turning the excavators into shovel monkeys rather than skilled professional archaeologists. I'll step down off my soapbox now.
No, I think good points raised. I'm going to go to Laura next, and then I've seen that Gareth has raised his hand as well.
Hi. I think Thomas has just said everything that I needed to say about that. Photogrammetry is being used from drones, is being used a lot more, and it is useful in many situations, but where it ain't useful is when the post-processing isn't completely done. And we do have serious problems with that when it reaches the post-excavation stage. Sections are still hand-drawn, but the only plans that we get now are survey drawings on GIS, which are produced by someone holding a stick at certain points on a feature. And it looks like somebody got an Etch-a-Sketch for Christmas, for those of you who are old enough to remember an Etch-a-Sketch. And so you get sections, and then the sections are recorded later. So you get sections that actually don't even sit on the feature they're supposed to relate to. And I am not joking. And I'm constantly going back and saying, you know, this is not good enough. It is good enough where digital recording does work is when all the paperwork, all the form filling is done on site, because that's something that we used to get so late in the process. But we are now getting that database as soon as we start the post-ex work, which is absolutely fantastic. But for drawn records, I'm just not a fan.
Yeah, all good points. Gareth, you stuck your hand up.
Hello. I just introduced myself, so I'm kind of coming from a different angle. So I was, until 8 months ago, I was working at Oxford Archaeology. So I was as a geomatics manager. So I was familiar with their systems and kind of their rollout of the digital systems there. And now I'm at Archaeology Southeast in a similar role. And we're kind of at the same point, kind of rolling out digital systems. So I think, yeah, my perspective is more, I would say, generally probably more pro-digital, but I have spent a long time, maybe the last 5 years, having exactly these discussions with people, particularly in illustration offices, about how we kind of find that sweet spot that you were talking about. And all of those problems that have just been highlighted in the previous two answers, they pretty much come up all the time. And it is a matter of not prescribing a system, not saying like we will just do photogrammetry. It's a matter of doing what's best for each site. So when I'm trying to introduce more, let's say, more digital planning, we're kind of working, it's often a site-by-site basis as well. A 10-hectare excavation will be different from an evaluation or watching brief or whatever. So we're working with the sites. So how can photogrammetry improve the recording that you're doing here? If it's going to be, if you've just got a few hours, say on a watching brief, potentially that's the only option or the better option than doing a hand plan. Or if you've got 10 hectares, a drone flight is much more practical. People don't have the budgets now to clean, hoe back hectares and hectares of sites and do 1 to 50 plans. So it's kind of working with the reality, but then I have seen that actually that exacerbates kind of it's self-fulfilling. The more digital you do, the more budgets drop, and therefore you have to do more. So I think getting processing done quickly is definitely something that I've always found really, really helps. So yeah, actually processing photogrammetry within a day or so and feeding back to site in either PDFs or paper so people can annotate, so that photogrammetry is useful on site, not just something you see 6 months later in the office when everyone's forgotten. So that's kind of my initial thoughts that I'll kind of throw in there for now.
Thanks, Gareth. Actually, it's really, really useful to have someone, a counterpoint, not an opposition, but the other side of it. And I totally see the value in. Sorry, if anyone else had raised their hand in the interim, I was making notes, so please shout at me if you wanted to talk. I mean, totally, we have to see the value in making it more efficient to get the information out of the field. But information is one thing, data is one thing. I think my personal feeling is that what we're risking at the minute is the interpretation side of archaeology, and how that fundamentally should be the person that's interacting with the feature. I also feel like, you know, another Roman ditch is another Roman ditch. And I'm sorry for any Romanists who are really excited about the Roman ditches. But ultimately, if you've got a linear across a field, then maybe you don't need to plan every centimetre of that linear to the nth degree. But where there are more complex or nuanced features, that it should be identified immediately that that is something that you're going to have to pay special attention to. I feel like there's a risk at the minute that there's no interpretation going into the spatial elements of some of these features we're recording, because of you focus your attention on making sure that your photogrammetry model is correct, that you've got the right lighting, camera settings, etc., rather than looking at the feature and thinking, but why is it here in this part of the site or in this landscape? Which again, that's or, you know, why is this bit this shaped and why is that bit that shaped? I'm thinking of a lime kiln. It's the example in my head at the minute, where we've just had one come up recently on a site, and it's very lovely, beautiful thing, a Roman lime kiln, and it's been planned with photogrammetry. So we haven't got any of the hand-drawn site plans that would usually accompany something like this, with your hashes and written notes annotating, saying, well, I think this is where the person dragged the lime kiln stuff out, you know, the lime out. I think this is how the person loaded the lime kiln. This is something that I think that would go onto a hand-drawn plan just as a sort of stream of consciousness from some archaeologists sometimes. And I wonder that if they're within the current recording systems and developing recording systems, are we leaving space for that level of interpretation? And I'd be willing to hear what people's experiences. Tom.
I just want to chime in on that, because it seems to me that we've got two separate issues intertwined with this. Because there's one is, what are the best ways of recording archaeology? Hand drawing, digital, etc. And all these techniques have their merits depending on what you've got. And often you may want to throw several of these techniques at a particular thing to record it. That's all well and good. The other issue, however, is the drive to make things cheaper, the race to the bottom in archaeology. Can we win the tender as opposed to the other guy by making our prices cheaper, making our work quicker, involving fewer people? And we're already the cheapest profession by far on any building site. You know, we've already undercut ourselves to that extent. Should we be promoting further undercutting, or should, as a group, should we be promoting best recording rather than fastest, most efficient, newest recording?
Yeah, actually, that was the other point I'd written down from Gareth's point, I think, was have we accidentally started to devalue archaeology? So I think for most people within the archaeological sector, I hope you all are experiencing as something of a pay inflation compared to previous years. Certainly starting salaries are considerably more healthy and able to get you somewhere than they were 20 years ago. They're still not good. I'm not saying they're good. I'm not saying there's still not a lot of progress to be made on that front, but the fact is that archaeologists are being paid a relatively higher wage than they used to be. But are we not accounting for that when we're submitting our tenders? Are we still delivering the same rates, but without having accounted for the fact that archaeologists cost more? And is that part of this issue where we feel like we have to keep pushing to find the quickest way to get the data off of site? That's a genuine question. I don't know if that's I don't have an answer to that. As a lot of illustration team people are, I think I'm quite removed from the front loading of our projects, detrimentally so often. in terms of being asked for how much will it cost to illustrate this program is something that doesn't occur to a lot of tendering managers, I don't think. But does that apply to the recording as well? As I say, I don't have an answer for this. Oh, Steve's in there. Hi, Steve. You're on mute, by the way. There you go.
Hi, Steve Allen, Conservation Department, York Archaeology these days. I suspect a lot of the problems we're getting with recording and the drive towards digital is about saving money at the front end of the project, about making the data recovery on site as quick and efficient as possible. But what's not being considered is the knock-on effect further down the line, when those of us who have to deal with the material which comes in from the site have to look at things and we cannot understand what it is that somebody was looking at. I've had issues with people sending me photography, photogrammetry, and I'm afraid sometimes even context sheets, which are simply not fit for purpose. So really, if we're trying to save money at the front end of the project, on the site itself, all you're really doing is transferring the costs further down to the line to the post-excavation side of it, which is actually going to be far more expensive in the long run than it is simply to record the initial tender, get the money in for the initial tender. If it takes me half an hour to sort out the shape, simply something as simple as the shape of an object which I'm looking at, I'm paid a lot more than the field person who's actually done the recording of that. It seems to be a false economy that's actually doing that. Absolutely. Things that way around. Particularly when we're not, those of us in post-ex who are specialists in these things, aren't actually allowed to go out on site and talk to the people doing the recording and help train them to provide a better result for everybody and encourage their career development. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think those are also really good points. Thanks. Gareth.
Hello. Yeah, again, all of these points are things that I think have come up with various discussions I've had in the past. Some of the, so one thing about plans. So as a geomatics kind of person, I've mainly been focused on the digital recording, but there's never been, so either at Oxford or Archaeology South East, there's never like a remit to say we will no longer do hand planning. So I don't know what it's like at other companies, but in those two instances, there's certainly a big move towards digital planning, but there wasn't a kind of veto on hand planning. And often I was battling to try and get people. So this is Oxford East specifically. So I didn't work for Oxford South for a long time, but we're actually trying to get people to hand plan was almost the difficulty. And if something would come up, I would say, well, this might be something we could hand plan, or maybe we do photogrammetry. And actually, as time went on, photogrammetry became much quicker and actually got more detail because the skill of planning became less common. And actually, the people who could plan actually became specialists more than people, like a lot of people could maybe use GPS and could do photogrammetry, but very few people could do a really good plan quickly. So that is certainly about training, but often you're starting from scratch, and if you're getting people coming from university who aren't doing a lot of planning potentially, or maybe a couple of weeks, from a kind of financial perspective, which inevitably comes into it, managers are going to say, well, let's do photogrammetry because we can get that done in 10 minutes rather than going through this process of making people plan. So I'm not saying that whether that's something I agree with. I do like to see hand plans done when they're done well. And I just want to talk about just rates just briefly. I think rates are going up, and also I don't necessarily think that the move to digital systems is, I think it tends to be seen as saving money in post-ex because of the digitized, especially pre-digitized contexts and context sheets and all databases being created on site. So I think we're making savings in one place and maybe spending more, maybe an investment on digital systems in another place. I don't think that when people are dropping budgets, I think money's just being moved around. That's from what I can see. So.
Thanks, Gareth. I think Laura came up first and then Lois. Let me know if I'm mispronouncing your name. So Laura. Oh, you're on mute, Laura.
Okay, quick question to go. Are you recording sections with photogrammetry, Gareth, as well? Or are they being drawn by hand?
No, they're all hand drawn. We will only record them, obviously, if it's something really interesting, or if there's a good reason to record it with photogrammetry, but that would be as well as a plan.
That's brilliant. Yes, I mean, similar situation to that I'm in where I work. So the majority of the actual illustration that comes into a post-excavation page is to tidy up GIS plans. We tend not to use the actual photographs in reports as plans. We tend to use a digitized version from those, mainly because there's so much background noise in color, stones, rocks. We want to show the outlines of things. We don't want to show what color the mud was. We know what color our mud is. It's usually 2IR10. The money issue is, again, I totally agree with you. We see what money is being saved on site is being spent on upgrading our systems, our digital systems, all the time, because they are very greedily updated regularly. New system comes out, new piece of kit comes out, and kit wears out. We're very good as archaeologists as wearing pieces of kit out very, very quickly. So yeah, again, it's not false economy. It is, like you say, it's the economy of money being moved around to different places. Again, that tends to work on attitudes within teams. One team who is constantly being upgraded with new equipment is seen by another team as being, the favorite child. Small little jealousies start to happen within teams, which is not great. We all want to work together on these things, and misunderstandings about where resources are being spent is quite detrimental to some people's working relationships. We've got to be really careful about that.
Thanks, Laura. Lois.
Lois is fine, but it's loose.
Loose. Sorry, I will use that one next time. Thank you. Loose.
I'm used to Lois now. Yeah, 2 points now, because I'm glad to hear actually that you do the recording of sections still by hand, because I would do that too, because often photogrammetry just fails. Like photography before, sometimes the layers are too faint and you just need to look at it, feel it, touch it, to feel any differences in the layers. It's of course interpretation then also, because often my digital colleagues say, yeah, that's interpretation, that's wrong already in the field, like it's all objective when you do it digitally. Anyway, that was not the point I wanted to make. I think it's already useful to start in the training the new students early already with digital recording techniques integrated in the normal in the regular curriculum. That's what we started to do a couple of years ago at my University of Applied Sciences, so that the students understand the point of recording and what they are recording digitally. So not only you have one specialist in the field that does all the digital recording, but they don't do the interpretation, they don't have the connection with the field. That's what I personally miss, because I was once the illustrator at our dig in Italy, and I've been gradually replaced by the drone, basically. So there actually is now nobody having the oversight of the entire field that can connect all the dots, because I was drawing every pebble in the field. So that's something that's indeed still a loss, I think. But we also gain a lot if we, on already an early stage in the first year, start with every course they take, train the students in with GIS and digital recording, but also we still train them with the analog. so that they see from where it comes, the recording techniques from analog to digital. Yeah, I'm not sure, but that's also training now is already changing, and we're really aware in where we want to go with our students. Also, that they're more critical in what they're doing and reflect on what they're doing. I'm hoping it's clear, but yeah.
Thanks, thank you, Luce. I think that I'm just going to interject, and then we'll come to Holly. Not interject, just add to that. So I think it's a really good point about it being integrated within the training. I think a large part of what's happening in the UK, and feel free for anyone to interject or come back at me on this one, is that increasingly the emphasis on training archaeologists is coming at the point where they enter the archaeological sector. There's less and less expectation that every archaeologist you get on site will now have a degree in archaeology. In fact, initiatives like the apprenticeship scheme driven by the last government opened up pathways, and CIfA have supported this, and I don't think it's a bad thing, but opened up pathways where you can essentially eschew the bit where you go to university and understand British archaeology before you get into the field. I can't remember what so that's, I think the students of archaeology of our sector are not captured in one place at the minute, and so a lot of on-the-job training and learning is what's being delivered, and so that's where your first point of contact really is with, you know, digital recording systems, etc., before you've even potentially entertained the idea that you could be hand planning. Just thought I'd get that one out there. And now Holly.
So just this has just been really interesting listening to all of this. I mean, as a researcher, I try and stay entirely neutral about and for me, it's just observing the fact that this change is happening. Whether it's well thought through or not, it's happening. And so for me, what I'm trying to understand is what the impact is, and getting to a point somewhere where we can say what best practice looks like, where, for example, if you're going to do 3D photogrammetry with drones, if you don't process that data the same day, then you shouldn't do it. So I'm just trying to understand what's being gained and what's being lost. But one other factor, just because I'm a researcher, but I work for the Archaeology Data Service, and putting that hat on, the thing about that really worries me the most about this is the fact that, you know, if you draw a plan on paper or permatrace, it can live happily live in a drawer for 100 years. And now doing things that are you're capturing where you're doing data capture in the field, that's now primary data. That's your primary data. You don't have a paper backup, or you may not, or it's moving more and more towards you don't have a paper backup. That is your primary only data. And that data and digital data is incredibly fragile. And, you know, you've already talked about the fact that you're constantly having to upgrade your kit, having to upgrade your software, having to upgrade your systems, and that just gets faster and faster and faster. And so you've got primary and of course, archaeology, if you're digging, it's non-repeatable as well. So you've got this fragile resource from a non-repeatable, you know, with non-repeatable information, and it might last on a hard drive for 5 years with hopefully the software hasn't changed too much, but in 10 years it probably may or may not be readable. And so to me, that's a huge impact that doesn't get talked about, that you know, we're meant to be, even if the work is done, the report's been submitted, and as far, you know, it's been paid for, as far as that being complete when it comes to the our long-term understanding of the archaeological record, anything that's born digital is at huge risk, to be honest. So how you want to factor that in, I don't know, but it's the thing that I fret about a lot.
Thanks, Holly. Sorry, I forgot I was on mute. My brother's just arrived. My dog's gone mental. That is a really interesting point, actually, and honestly, something that I hadn't considered from my experience. I think that a lot of these issues are about to flag up to us at the sort of the far end of analysis and interpretation. Realistically, we're probably realistically a minimum of 3 years behind CITES. And if you look back, DRS systems really have only been extant for 4 or 5 years at the very most, I would think, in the sense that we understand them now. So I don't think that, certainly not in where I work at Cotswold, and we are quite aggressive in our getting our stuff out the door compared to some other organizations that I have also worked for, and naming no names. But I do think that I think in the next year or two, we're suddenly going to get to a point where we've got to present plans that are just pointy polygons for a publication, and it hasn't happened yet, but it's inevitably about to happen. And I don't know how we're gonna, as illustrators, that's abhorrent. I mean, that's not something that I'm happy with as an illustrator. It's not interpretive, it's not representative of what's on site, it's not accurate. And these are all things, all fundamental elements of what makes illustration, and what makes analyzing archaeology worthwhile. There's no point doing it if you're not doing it properly. So yeah, so that's kind of where I'm sitting at the minute. I think we're suddenly going to have a massive issue with born digital archaeological recording systems, and it's going to be the job of illustrators to make something presentable when you just don't have the evidence to plug into it, essentially. Okay, I think Tom had his hand up first, and then Gareth, and then Laura. So that's the order we're going to go. Okay. So Tom.
Right. Well, I mean, I will confess that I am old enough to have been around at the birth of laser scanning, when exactly the same thing happened. The laser scanning salesman convinced the curators who had the money but not necessarily the knowledge that, oh, the laser scanning will do everything. It'll be quick, it'll be cheap. You don't need all those archaeologists up the scaffolding to record your building. And we're in exactly the same position. It took years to undo that, to the point where people realized that actually laser scanning is one part of the toolkit of understanding your standing structure or whatever. And what I'm not sure of is, because I haven't actually done any research on this, to be honest, I'll confess, do we already have a guide to good illustration practice as a document people can refer to? And if not, is this the point where we need to make one? And it will set out all of these discussions about what makes a quality archive. It'll also point out the fact that there's a difference between the archive you need to understand your archaeology so you can write up your report, and the quality of archive you need to leave to the future when you deposit this, because other people will need to be able to see the things that you destroyed with your trowel. And, you know, there's a sort of moral obligation involved in that. Do we need a document that sets all this stuff out in a useful and handy fashion, if there isn't one already?
So as I said earlier, what we don't have at the minute is a standard for archaeological illustration, but hopefully it's something that we will be in a position to get out. Oh my God, if we could get it out by this time next year, I would be ecstatic. I think it is. I don't think that's unfeasible with where we are with it. As I say, the next bit we need to do is consult you guys on it. There is a clear distinction between, and it's becoming more clear within CIfA as well, a clear distinction between standards and guidance. So standards is something that are enforceable, but only if you're ascribing to the body that sets those standards. So we're all CIfA members, so we have to uphold standards set by CIfA. There are other archaeologists and other archaeological organizations that are not CIfA organizations or archaeologists. So they are under no onus to do it. So in that sense, it's setting best practice by setting standards. But there's also best practice and or guidance, which CIfA sometimes initiate, but they need to be distinguished from standards, because best practice is something you should aspire to, but there's always a nuance on whether you can or can't attain it, and there's going to be million and one reasons why that might be impacted. But there are standards, and so yes, we do need a standard for this, but I'm also thinking that we now probably need a standard for digital recording is the way that my brain is going for this, or to make sure that standards of recording that exist, CIfA have a whole ton of them on the various different ways you do fieldwork, etc. But make sure that those standards have been made that they apply to this new digital era we find ourselves in, or if they already do that they are being upheld. So I think that's a further discussion, and I think this is shaping to me into what might be a wider discussion point at the conference with key other stakeholders such as post-ex specialists, such as fieldwork specialists, project managers. The whole gamut, I think, need to be involved in this discussion. So that's what I'm thinking is probably an outcome here. But that's not an answer to your question. But the short answer is yes, there should be a standard, and we need to make sure that we have a standard somewhere. But we may or may not have one yet, and we need to review that.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm happy to be involved if and when you do, given that
Brilliant.
Part of my remit is digital recording strategy for Historic England.
Yeah.
I'm not volunteering to be on the committee because it looks like you have quite a few volunteers already lining up, but I'd be happy to work closely.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. I think, Gareth, you were next with your hand up. Was it Gareth?
Yes. Hi.
Yes, thanks. Hi.
So just on the standards and then guides, I think also, I mean, geomatics is now a much bigger profession, I guess, than it was, with things becoming more digital, and there isn't really any specific guides. It kind of falls between the cracks, I think, a little bit, which is one of the reasons I'm here, because often it's difficult to find a forum where like a lot of what I need to discuss with people is actually being discussed, because it's either in the post-ex or fieldwork, and geomatics kind of is right in the middle of the two, and we're kind of active throughout the process. So I think any guides, either geomatics itself needs to have guidelines or need to be integrated into the various places, well, obviously fieldwork and illustration where it's used and captured. Actually, the reason I put my hand up was when you mentioned pointy polygons, though, because I just wanted, so I think one of the things we did mention earlier was getting photogrammetry specifically, or survey data for that matter, processed quickly, and then getting feedback to the field. So I think pointy polygons shouldn't really be a thing if we've got this dialogue with survey data and photogrammetry and stuff getting back out into the field, and people in the field then reacting to it, saying, well, this doesn't look like my feature. So then you don't end up in illustration 3 years down the line with pointy polygons. So I think there is maybe this is something that could go into the guidelines, but making sure there's this office field dialogue going on to stop exactly these kind of bad data getting through to the end of the process.
Thanks. Yeah. I have a little question on that. So obviously, if we've got the photogrammetry, we can digitize that up, but it's still, the onus of who is doing the interpretation is then shifted away from the field worker, who is the person that interrogated and excavated that feature. Do you have a process either at ARS or previously at OA East whereby it was someone's specific job to make sure that there was digitized plans from the photogrammetry at a point where you could still address any concerns or issues in the field?
Yeah, yes, pretty much. Photogrammetry. It's ASE, by the way, not AOS. But,
oh, sorry. So I can't remember what I said.
Yeah, pretty much the photogrammetry is used to replace a hand plan is sent back out to the field while they're still in the field. I would say, I think maybe some, occasionally there might be a delay, but generally it's back within a week or quicker if needed.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, or uploaded onto these digital maps, obviously, so that which are what people are using now.
Yeah, hopefully we won't see pointy polygons, but I'm not going to be surprised if some of this get through. Okay, and someone else had their hand up, and I think it was Laura, but you got disconnected.
I'm back in, thank you.
Excellent.
Okay, sorry I missed the end of your talk there, Gareth, and but my comment really is about the standards. I just want to say we really need that now. We are in such a situation where I'm sending out guidance to our workers on site and having only one, but a comment coming back saying, well, actually, I really think we ought to be adhering to industry standards here. And I sort of looked at it and I thought, right, Guy, if you can find me some industry standards that we could adhere to, I'm quite happy to look at them, because I'm not really sure what he was referring to. I suspect it might be guidelines that might have been put out by another unit somewhere at some point in the past, but all of those are actually all about drawn records, etc. So and to try to get standards for digital technology is nightmarish, because as we all know, the digital technology is being renewed, upgraded, new stuff's coming in all the time. For instance, we're being asked now as a unit to work in spectral imaging, which is well, I'm not going to say it's impossible for us, but it's almost impossible given the standards of computing that we have at the moment. We need much, much, much more serious computing technology to be able to deal with that sort of thing. So, you know, all that is encompassed in recording standards. We can't just stay with just drawn records as a recording standard. We really have got to look at these standards. But if we have a standard that can come out from the graphics archaeology group soon, then at least as and when I'm asked what are the industry standards, I can refer them to that. And when units are being investigated, oh, sorry, not investigated, inspected for their ROs, registered organisation status, it is a factor that they will also have to adhere to, because it will be one of the standards, and there can be questions about it. At the moment, we're just managing to slip into other people's standards, like the pottery standards. We're there as there will be an illustrated catalogue, and that's where it comes to. There's no point at which that it says in the pottery standards, and during the analysis, records will be made. Graphic records will also be made during the analysis of pottery. It's usually right at the end of the job, and it's just for the catalogue. There are instances where obviously that may not be necessary, but there are instances that I'm involved in right now where the illustrator really should be the first person to see a job. That is the main thing. It's just to say, and again, sort of somebody else has managed to say it before me, I am willing to stand up and support any move you make in getting those standards up and out this year. And I even thought maybe I should go on the committee so that I can encourage this. So yes, please, let's see those standards as soon as possible, because we are in dire need. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. Yeah, just to say that we have had just a little shift forward in momentum on standards, and it's something that as the committee we've been trying to prioritise as long as I've been chair, and honestly we have gained ground on it. And as I say, I'm at a point where I'd be happy to consult on what we've created. I'm going to now have a review of it based on our discussion today, but I think that essentially the standard is the standard, and the guidance is something that we need to look at, not just this committee, but across the whole of the sector, because obviously this starts very much from the tendering process all the way down to post-excavation and archiving. So you know, it's not just although we are the visual output specialists. And to come back to Gareth, actually, I'm really happy you're here. this is the only special interest group really that fits for surveyors, and we've always been keen that surveyors are part of the group of graphic archaeology. It's just something that we haven't necessarily managed to communicate out to all of the geometicians out there in the wider world. So please encourage your colleagues this way, because of the only way we can represent you is by having you guys here. I will say that Johnsky, who left earlier, he is I think our first in forever actual, he's a geospatial specialist. He does survey and geomatics on the committee. So bring your friends, bring your colleagues, and come and support us and help us to represent you as well. Cool. Okay, Kate, I have seen your hand up. I'm just going to quickly whiz through the chat because I realised that a few things have come up in there, just in case they add to further conversation. But Elsa has said that she thinks this is prevalent in historic building recording. Goodness me, sorry, that was hard to get out. Less people doing measured illustrations. I think because of cost-cutting measures largely, but obviously that's pretty fundamental to actually recording and interpreting and understanding your building. And then Andy has said that everything in where you are in Northwest Germany is planned for GNS and total station, and a quick sketch on the context sheet, which is where the interpretation mostly comes in. I think you do still see that. It's particularly more prevalent with more senior archaeologists who are used to doing that interpretation, and so are not satisfied with their role of just digging the hole and then having someone else plop it on to a plan. Unfortunately, clients getting pissy and refusing to pay if something takes too much time is also normal. Yeah, okay, fair enough. I know that Germany, it's a bit different. We have a little bit more strength in our planning laws around archaeology here. It's not as unified in Germany, unfortunately. I think it tends to be more local authority led than having a wider, as we've got our God, I want to call it MPPF, and I can't remember if that's the current or old. Yeah, that's the right one, MPPF. So PPG 16 or whatever it was. Yeah. And then lastly, Laura has said post excavation for smaller projects is often estimated as a percentage of time on site. So if more is being shifted towards post excavation duties, then that needs to be re-examined, I think. And then Holly is helpfully a guide to the guidance to good practice on the ADS, which I'm going to go and check through what's on there. So that Elsa's pointed to HE guidance for drawing for understanding, though that one is particularly aimed at building archaeology, as I recall. Andy's doing post-ex on a site and couldn't open CAD file because it was too old. So yep, alluding to the issues that Holly pointed out with data versions and digital data not being able to be kept timely and up to date. So yes. Okay, and then Kate, sorry to keep you waiting. I just wanted to go over those.
Oh, you're all right. Hello, everybody. I'm a project officer. I work for an archaeological unit in Derbyshire, and I've been in archaeology for about 15 years. And I've worked my way up from fieldwork member of staff, like just out digging the holes, to being the senior project officer. And one of the things I found over the last couple of years, especially since we've been moving towards the digital side, is that there's a massive disconnect from the fieldwork staff to when it comes into post-ex, because people are not experienced enough or trained. So I have done plans drawn by hand. We're now moving into that digital age, as you've all said, of using GPSs and doing our drawings that way. I can see both ends of the spectrum. I can see the speed on site, definitely. And I can also see the problems with post-ex. And it all boils down to the way that it's delivered through the system, I think, because we've got staff on site that don't have enough experience, that have been told, oh, this is how you survey something. They'll survey it, but then in post-ex, the illustrators or the project officer might be looking at it and going, what on earth is this? So that's where you do get coming back. I've been quite fortunate in my experiences where I work, because I've gone through all the roles. I do all my own surveying. I can check my own records. I can check the plans against the survey. But waiting 3 or for the geomatics team to get back in touch with me is not really good for me on site personally. Sorry, Gareth. So I ideally need to check that data myself. So what I tend to do to help bridge that gap is to check the data towards the end of the day to make sure I've got all the information that I need. And the idea of context sheets on iPads or whatever app that you do, the people don't look at it properly. The staff don't look at what they're trying to identify because they've not had to log it by hand, but because they've not had to stand there and plan it and really pay any attention to it, they don't understand the processes of what information we need to off the site to get to a point where we can publicate it basically into our reports and things like that. So in a way I am against the apps and the updated context sheets on there because it does take a lot longer. But I guess there are ways where you can make the time so it's not as long, but it's a disconnect from the archaeology. So typing up a context register or a context table and looking at the drawings whilst they're next to you side by side, you are able to understand the site and able to offer that interpretation. I don't know if anybody else has got anything else to say, or if I've just gone over what other people have said. I'm really sorry.
I think that's a really good viewpoint to understand as well. Thank you so much for coming in and contributing to this discussion as well. I think it had crossed my mind earlier, but I'd forgotten to talk about it. But because we've had a really good conversation so far, I think we've talked about the spatial and the visual outputs, but this conversation it also applies to the context sheets, etc. I think CA, our DRS now has a lot of drop-down boxes for speed and for data consistency. That's great, but if you have too many pre-selectable options, I think it stops you from interrogating the thank you, sorry, I've just been offered a cup of tea. Yeah, if you're given too many pre-selectable options, you stop thinking outside those parameters. Even if you've got an other box, sorry, dogs just licks me in the ankle as well. Even if you've got those an other option, if there's something that's close enough, you're likely to take the closer option for time and convenience, particularly if you're under pressure from site supervisor or project manager, or the client keeps stumping around on site saying, why is this taking so long? You know, you're going to feel under pressure to get it done as quickly, but not as to the highest quality, I think, as possible. So yeah, I think this whole thing is not just about pointed polygons or not, as the case may be, or who's doing the interpretation. It's about making sure that there is the latitude for the diggers on site to be able to represent that interpretation, and to be invited that should be the foremost consideration when we're looking at the site 3 years down the line. You know, that what they thought it was as important, if not more important, than what it looks like on a plan that no one who was there has had any dealings in doing the interpretation for. Cool. Okay. I think we have talked over this a lot, and I think we've got a really interesting recording here. I think what I'd like to do with this is I think I want to go back over it and create some key themes for discussion, which I think I would like to take to some of our other special interest groups and invite a more wide discussion. It could be that, as I say, it could be that the conference is a good forum for this. I think what I will do is, once I've drafted up salient discussion points, I will share them out through the bulletin as well, to the same membership groups that were hit with the original invite, and more broadly potentially. I'm not really sure, I can't remember how far it went out, but I think it would be useful to be able to direct people to this, invite them to come and view this discussion, and then to continue this discussion with an aim to looking at what are our standards that deal with this. Is there already stuff in place that we should be consulting, and if there isn't, then you know, where does it need to be? And I suspect the answer is that it needs to be in all levels of standards throughout the entire archaeological process. So yeah, and for our part, I will review the guidance before we send it out for consultation to make sure that this is accounted for. But yeah, my primary action is to get the consultation on the guidance out. And once that happens, I'm more than happy for you to share that as widely. It's not a closed consultation. I want it to be the most open consultation imaginable, because I think, as you say, the visual elements of archaeology are prevalent throughout the entire process, but the outputs that we create are part of the archaeological record and understanding. So they need to be accurate and reusable and the best that they can be for not just us, but for future generations of archaeologists who will then refer back to the research we've been doing. So with that, I just want to open up. Is there any last closing points that anyone wants to raise or talk about? And if not, I've given myself a whole bunch of actions to get on with off the back of this meeting. No, I'll just give you a couple of minutes to figure out or turn on your cameras and wave if the little hand thing is problematic, as I know it is. But otherwise, I think this has been a really good conversation and discussion. I think it's left me with more questions and answers probably, but I think that's a mark of a, a useful conversation. Thank you all of you for coming along and presenting your opinions and sharing, or even just listening. Look for further conversations on this issue of I think data quality through digital recording is what we're looking at as a wider theme. And oh, sorry, I think I saw briefly, did I see a little flicker of a hand? Was it Laura?
Don't panic, it's just a thank you hand.
Oh, all right, okay, thanks. So yeah, okay, brilliant. Yeah, as I say, I don't want this to just be a discussion that goes into the void. So through our next committee meetings, it will be something that we try and pick up on. I think, as I say, it sounds like we've probably got an entire bloody session actually for archaeology, but there's got to be something that fits in the theme. It's the future of our profession, I think, is the theme for this year's conference. So there's got to be at least one session that's going to allude to all of this. So we'll make sure that we get our foot in that door. Brilliant. Okay, well, thank you all so much. I've had a lovely, lovely time with you this morning. I hope it was gainful for all of you, and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.